and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para-X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Step outside of your comfort zone. See the world with a whole new perspective. Join us and experience the unexplained on the Paranormal View.
And welcome everybody right here to the Paranormal View on the Parax Radio Network. I want to thank everybody for being with us tonight. Those, of course, listening in the chat room and those listening from around the world, we appreciate each and every one of you. If you are listening from somewhere else and you'd like to come over to the chat room, it's at para-x.com and just click on the Chat Now button up at the top and you'll be in with all these wonderful people. You'll be able to interact with them and interact with us. Ask us questions of our guest. So if you do have questions, though, and you don't want to come over to the chat room, you can still ask a question by sending it to theparanormalview@gmail.com and just put attention question, and we will get those answered for you. We got a lot going on for the show tonight. A couple of things, though, to start with. It's Memorial Day weekend. I want to thank everybody and hope everybody has a great weekend and everybody is safe and just has a lot of fun. And we're going to be giving away 2 tickets tonight, and we'll do that probably right after our first break. So be prepared for that. The tickets are going to be for the Mid-South, which is in July 27th through the 29th, and it's in Louisville, Kentucky. So be prepared for that. We've got a great guest tonight who actually is more like a co-host with us, seems like, as much as he comes on. Yeah, and everybody likes him. He has lots of information, and tonight we're going to have a lot of topics and other information to talk about. So, Jeff, why don't you introduce our guest?
Yes, well, our guest tonight is a returning Thomas Wertman, who I had to miss his last guest appearance because I was shooting my film. Thomas is a former dean at the American National University. He's the state director at MUFON and co-director at Cleveland Ufology Project. And having studied business and human resources at Kaplan University, Thomas has learned to read people when it comes to interviewing UFO witnesses and abductees. So welcome back, Thomas Wertman. Yay!
Hey, thank you. And you had to miss my last one just to do a movie. Come on.
It's actually its unofficial premiere is June 6th in Hollywood. So if anybody wants to get information on how to see it, contact me through either Facebook, theparanormalview.com, or on Facebook, on Twitter, all that.
Well, we're going to be talking a lot about UFOs, everything connected with it, and a lot about the great government alien cover-up and their famous quotes, which I'll have on what one of the astronauts said later, is, "It's for your own good."
So, although we might want to start off with, today we lost astronaut Alan Bean. He passed away today. He was one of, I think, the 4th man to walk on the moon.
You're right, 4th man.
Yeah, he also headed the Skylab program.
Oh.
And I hadn't seen that yet in the news, so that's news to me. So you don't realize that we haven't been doing the space shuttles and all for a real long time, but you don't realize that it has been a while, and a lot of the earlier astronauts has gotten up there in age, and that's why we're losing some of them. So, of course, they wasn't real young, I guess, to start with when he was doing all that. I wanted to talk. start off with a thing. I'd sent a copy of it to Thomas, and something that took place in 1974 that I'm sure that I have heard about it, and since I've been doing the show, but it's been a while, and I totally forgot about it. And I thought maybe it'd be a good thing just to talk about, because it does relate with weird stuff, you might say, and whether it's alien or not, they were still speculating. But it's called The Discovery of the Betz Sphere. As it became known, fascinated multiple fields of interest, from ufologists, ancient astronaut enthusiasts, archaeologists, scientists, and even the United States military. Each wished to investigate the mysterious object in relation to their areas of research or concern. When the national and ultimate international media ran with the story, the Betz family and their enigmatic find became the focus of multiple representatives from these various organizations, and would ultimately find themselves in the middle of a storm of interest from all directions. If you've never heard of the Betz Sphere, it was a round ball about the size of a bowling ball. I guess it was found in March 26, 1974 on Fort George Island near Jacksonville, North Carolina. Some of the things that it happened after they found it, they took it back to their house, and the older son was a medical student, and one day he had it in his room, and his girlfriend come over and he started playing his guitar music, and it started vibrating. And that was when they first realized that there might be something more to this than just something that they found in the field. So
yeah, but didn't they find a whole bunch of spheres in Peru?
I didn't
Seems to
see
me
that.
that there was a show on that also there's like tons and tons of these spheres. It was Peru or it was China, and I cannot remember which.
I've seen a picture of one in a field where looked like maybe a little Peruvian girl or somebody like that was kind of hunched down looking at it. So that it probably was, but I didn't see it on this particular thing. Thomas might have come up with on it.
Well, when you sent me that story, I cannot remember where I read that at, whether it's like the National Enquirer or some magazine like that, at one time. And it was back in the 1970s, right around the time it occurred. And when you mentioned the Betz Sphere, I'm like, wait a minute, that's what was on that magazine that time. And I remember reading the article, and it was I think it weighed about 22 pounds, if I remember right, something like that. And you haven't, I mean, it's one of those things that when the story came out, it was all over the news, and then all of a sudden it just disappeared. But you're right, Barbara, there were other spheres reported around the world. And if I remember correctly, it was Peru. I think you're also right, too. It was some in China, but they've been found all over, so it wasn't unique. But this story is just the one that really came out.
And with all the people who investigated it, looked at it, tested it or whatever, it would, there was all sorts of different things that this thing did. They said that they could put it on a table and it would roll up to the edge of the table and stop. And then it would roll back across the table to the other edge and stop, would not fall off. And it would do this 4 or 5 times and then set in the middle. They said you could roll it on the floor and it'd roll so far and it would like turn on its axis and roll back to the spot where it originally started and stopped.
So it's kind of like a little Roomba.
Well, didn't they say that if somebody grabbed it and shook it also?
Right. And it acted like it was trying to run away and get away from somebody. Yeah. It also, I guess a psychic, or let's see who was, Dr. James Harder. I guess he come in and looked at it, and no, it was a Dr. Hardy.
No, I think you're right. Harder is one of them.
Hardy, maybe that's what was Harder. Yeah. Anyway, he said that it was like a doomsday thing, and after that, it was just like everybody dropped it. Nobody wanted anything to do with it. I guess it kind of disappeared. Nobody knows where it went to, if the family still had it. So no telling where it went to. It says, might the device have somehow managed to manifest such paranormal energy, or maybe open a portal to another realm? What was it, a peek into the technology of an alien race, or a glimpse into mythical technology or antiquity? But the question is, where is it now? Nobody knows.
Good question. And the one you mentioned, Harder, he was actually at one time the head of an organization called APRO, which is the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, which was around for years. I think it started like in 1969, about 1982, when they kind of disbanded. But he was the head of the organization for a while, and he was also a professor of engineering, if I remember correctly. So it wasn't like he had kind of like a bogus background. And when he came out and looked at it, he'd already been involved in UFOs and that type of field, because he did research on the Betty Hills abduction case, remember, right? Also Travis Walton. And then there's another case down in Pascagoula where he did the research on. So he'd been involved in those fields over the years. So when he came out to look at it, that was serious. I mean, here you've got a bigger organization looking at Spear to try to analyze what it really is. And I was doing some digging after I got your email, because I do have some of the records on there from the organization. And I had my computer doing a search all afternoon, Henry, for keywords through, I think, about 8 terabytes of documents I've got. And I couldn't find anything directly associated with it that was able to be word scanned on or picked up. It may be in a hard copy, though, that I haven't had time to look at.
Well, I downloaded what I got from a place called UFO Insight.
Yeah, and I think he was looking, what Harder was maybe looking at, as like the human factor again. Was there incidents maybe of telepathy? I mean, his specialty, if I remember right, was also in magnetism, magnetic fields, and so forth, physics on there. And I think he was looking for some sort of a connection maybe along those lines. But I couldn't find any more research. And I was hoping to really stumble across something to really give you something really good on that tonight. But I'll keep looking. I'm not going to give up on that one.
Well, that sounds good. I'm sure that once all that come out and all the other agencies just dropped it like a hot potato because of what was said, that I don't know if they took and hid it somewhere on the family farm, or because nobody wanted to do anything else about it.
Yeah, well, there's a whole background story behind that too. On the whole thing, I dug in a little bit farther, and that family, the Betts, bought a house that looked almost like a castle down in Florida, and it had been abandoned for years. And it originally was owned by a family, if I remember correctly, called Neff. And the guy was an architect that built this, but then there were mysterious deaths in the family. So all of a sudden now we have a little bit of that paranormal factor entering into it. I think one of the family members committed suicide. And I'm trying to remember all the details about the other. It was like 3 different family members died of unique circumstances on there. And then that castle basically sat vacant for years. I mean, one group used it kind of like a summer place until the Betts family took it over. But it had almost like a paranormal type of activity, it appeared, maybe going on around it.
So you think it could have been something that they had used or had or something and just took it out and dumped it in the field?
Had used, maybe it's something along those lines, because they really don't know the origin of where that spear was, except I remember it was found like in a swamp or something like that, a swampy area. But that house down there now, I think, is pretty much abandoned again.
Huh. Wow.
And the group that came in, they had a group they called the Blue Ribbon Panel, to be exact. And I think they might have had individuals on there like Alan Hynek, Harder, J. Allen Hynek, some other ones on there, but where it kind of loses credibility at, and I'm not saying it really should lose credibility, but where it does is they were sponsored by the National Enquirer, because they used to put money up to go after these interesting incidents and events back in the 1970s. And they were putting up either like $5,000 or $10,000 for the most interesting story of the year. And it was being judged by these individuals whether it was good or not.
It was called the Blue Ribbon Club.
Blue Ribbon Club.
Yeah.
And I think that's who it was, the sponsor behind, if I remember right. It was the National Enquirer. Now, I'm not saying it was all bad, because, I mean, yes, they're out to sell magazines at that time. But on the other hand, they're putting money out to have people look at interesting events. So to me, that was the good thing. Now, also, if I remember right, when they looked at that spear, they tried to do an analysis of, they said they had the Navy come in at one point, the Marines at another point, and some Navy individuals who they didn't really identify supposedly tried to do an X-ray on it. And then the first one was unsuccessful. We did another one, and they saw two like other spears inside of the bigger one.
Yeah, that's what it says in the thing. It says he was particularly intrigued with the findings of the Navy regarding the two spheres inside the object.
And it goes back to, I believe they calculated, trying to determine the weight of the objects inside. And what was it now in there, Henry?
It says they
compared it back to uranium, like 92 or something like that.
Atomic number of 92.
And this was way beyond the atomic number of 92. I think they estimated it to be like 140 or something like that.
They said here it was, excess of 140.
Which was way off the charts. And this is where Harder came in with his background. And he said that if they basically took and tried to use a more powerful instrument to analyze it, it could set off maybe an atomic explosion.
Oops.
Whoops. Yep. Sorry.
If you want to know how to get Godzillas, that's how you get Godzillas.
That's right. That's right. But, the thing that got me is when I saw this, it's like the whole story dried up in the 1970s, and you don't see anything on the family, the spear, or anything after that.
And after it. Yeah.
Right. It just be.
Now, in looking at the sphere, of course, it's old photography, obviously, but it looks almost like it's a brass or a copper. It has that shiny look to it.
I think they said it was a stainless steel that had like a nickel. And again, I was trying to see if I could find this afternoon any detailed analysis of the metallurgical qualities of that. And remember, I said it was stainless with, I believe, nickel. But it was a stainless that was also like some stainless is non-magnetic.
Right.
This stainless was actually magnetic to a degree.
Hmm.
And it was designed that way because the quality they added into it, Barbara, improved the heat treating qualities of the material because of its composition.
Okay, I don't know if you've seen them or not or heard them, the Tibetan singing bowls.
Yes.
This sounds an awful lot like that, where maybe a combination of three when activated, has a different quality to it or a composition?
It's possible. I know what you're talking about. I used to have some of the what we call Tai Chi balls or something like that. We had. They used to roll around my hands when I practiced martial arts.
Yeah.
And like you say, maybe it's along the same lines, and there may be something about the tonal, the tone output. They also, I believe, said that the spheres appear to be affected by light. And with the intensity of light, it changed the appearance of the spheres, if I remember right. That even had an effect. Mm-hmm. So it goes beyond the tonal. It's almost like they're sensitive to the outside environment. Like you said, Henry, they're rolling across the table. They get towards the edge. They're not going to fall off, but they back up. They go the other way. Like you said, Jeffrey, the Roomba, examining the room and finding out its limitations. It also...
senses density.
Density also appeared to be... I'm looking for a better word, but happier when they put it on the floor off the table.
Right.
Like it knew it wasn't going to fall off the table that way. It was on in a safer environment to be able to move around.
Which is also interesting because if it fell off and it's being a composition of metal, it's not like it's going to crack open. But obviously it had enough intelligence to know it would jar it and perhaps create even more vibration or noise.
Right. And there was no apparent seams on the object, but it did have a pattern which appeared to be in a V-shaped formation on it.
Huh.
And again, I'm pulling all this stuff out of memory on there, a lot of it. So it's great how you can remember things that 50 years ago, but you can't remember what you ate yesterday. But I went through and I was trying to dig up more stuff on that. And it's if you look recently, Barbara, there's absolutely nothing out there on it.
I just put in chat and in our Skype chat the only link I could find.
Right, with the
information on the house and the ball.
Yeah. Well, I was living in Wilmington, North Carolina, which is about 50 miles from Jacksonville, in 1974, and I swear I do not remember hearing anything on the news about anything about that. Of course, I wasn't into paranormal or anything like that at the time either, but I still, something like that, they should have been headlines on news and stuff, but I don't remember it.
You think, I think where I saw it at, to be honest with you, was in the checkout line at the supermarket.
On one of those magazines?
Yeah, because my grandmother bought those things, and she had to have them all the time, the same with my mother, and they would pass them back and forth and read them. So, of course, when I'm going through helping Mom get groceries at that time, you had to pick up the stuff in the checkout and read what's on the cover. Even though you know it may not be true, I mean, you just had to look at it for entertainment value.
Well, we all had to figure out what happened to Bat Boy. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, you had to know what happened to Bat Boy, of course. Bat Boy and where Elvis is going to pop up at next.
High-end journalism.
That's right. That's right. As a matter of fact, as Jeff Goldblum said in the movie The Big Chill, he only writes an article for People magazine as long as people can have an average relieve themselves. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, watch it read in the bathroom. Yeah.
That's it. That's how long the article should be.
Which oddly enough is accurate in that if I'm searching through stuff and I come across an article online by the New Yorker, I lose interest really quick, and I shouldn't do that, but I'll be reading like, this is interesting, man, it's long.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm guilty of the same thing. I find myself gravitating more to shorter articles all the time now, and it's either because I'm getting older or maybe I'm just less patient than I used to be able to take that much time to read.
Barbara, I know you
That's
had
cool.
something that you was wanting to talk about too.
I have a ton of stuff I want to talk about because I'm into space stuff.
That's why I
You know,
post so
I'm
many sciencey articles on the Paranormal
yeah.
View page on Facebook.
It's because we just had another SpaceX launch, and I love watching them. I was watching it long before they jettisoned a car into space, but it seems from Elon Musk's point of view, as well as a few other, and we've talked about it before, this big jump and big seems what surge into getting into space. And I know that Elon Musk also worked with Stephen Hawking, and I can't remember who else, on a $20 million project to send nanoprobes,
Ooh.
uh, which is like a short pulse, um,
Oh, they're going to
photon
use
pulse.
that ion pulse thing that makes it
Yeah,
go close to the speed of light, but not quite.
exactly.
Oh,
To
wow.
send all these little tiny robots out into space looking for intelligent life.
I knew the theory was to make those engines, big enough for even transport vehicles, but I didn't know they were doing them. They were able to make them small enough for nanoprobes.
Lightweight works better because you don't have to have that much power.
And not
They can
that
just
much mass.
ship it out. Yeah.
Huh.
So
And
Thomas, we were talking. Yeah, go ahead.
and these things weren't big. I mean, these were really only about the size of a postage stamp.
Hmm.
So I mean, you think about that, Jeffrey. It's how small.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up when we were talking earlier about being about watching the Mercury space program, and Gemini and Apollo, and you got so used to that technology back then that you think, okay, this is how we have to get out into space. And all of a sudden, you've got these individuals coming out with unique ideas, and they're thinking outside the box with those nanoprobes.
Yeah.
And the idea is to basically take that probe on one of the ideas behind it and shoot a laser at it. And the laser is going to be providing the propulsion. And the idea is to get these things up to, was it like a quarter the speed of light, if I remember right? A quarter the speed of light, something along those lines.
Well, I read an article that was like really even as close to the speed of light as you can get without, Albert Einstein coming over and smacking you.
It made me think about if you had a star only like 4 light years away, you could potentially launch an object at that star system, a swarm of these things. And if it took, let's say, if they went a quarter the speed of light, you're talking then about 16 years to get there. I mean, look how long it's taken us to get a conventional spacecraft to, let's say, Uranus and Neptune and Pluto. But now we're talking getting something to an entire different star system in 16 years.
Remember what a big deal when Voyager actually was leaving past the orbit of Pluto. We're like, remember when we launched that so far ago? Now it's out of here.
It's out of here. I mean, I remember as a kid when, again, going back to the old stories, when they launched that and how big of a deal that one was. And then when the Star Trek movie came out with V'ger,
yeah, really,
returning on there, V'ger coming back. Hey, don't knock the whole movie. It wasn't completely bad.
Oh, it wasn't bad. It doesn't mean it was. They just didn't know what they were doing.
Well, the thing is the director was the same director who did The Day the Earth Stood Still.
The remake of the original.
The original, Robert Wise.
Yeah.
Robert Wise. But when I see the technology coming out of the private space programs, I mean, think about, in this case, I'm just having these memories pop in my mind right now. I remember going down and being at Cape Canaveral and looking at the original Mercury launch pads and being inside basically the box out there at the point where the button was, in theory, pushed to launch the rocket. And you're about a stone's throw away from where the rocket was, behind like 3 foot of concrete, something like that. And you're thinking of what it took to get that rocket up. And by the way, they told me down there that when they fueled it, they had the rocket setting on a truck scale to tell if they had enough fuel in this thing. That's where the technology was. But now you're talking about launching these nanoprobes. And, oh, matter of fact, just backing up, think about launching a rocket like they've been doing and having them land on platforms over the ocean.
Well, not even on the ocean. That's just the first stage that lands on that.
Yeah.
The other two stages, he has pinpointed on these landing pads. It's like right out of an old science fiction movie where you see the spaceships landing on Earth. Exactly like that.
And you couldn't do that, 20 years ago? They couldn't have dreamed of that. But now it's like becoming to the point it's almost going to be commonplace in a few years, that that's going to be expected.
Well, I was reading that some of the computers they were doing for some of the moon missions were the equivalent of like Commodore 64s.
Oh, not even that. I mean, you could probably, the original space Gemini rockets, I think that was the original, they were operating off of what a modern calculator was.
Yeah, it was like only barely a couple of meg, and there were people like, not Jim Gates, but that kind of level of person saying, well, no home computer is ever going to need more than 64 meg of RAM. I'm like, seriously? Yeah. You look at that now.
It's 64 meg of RAM, and here I'm sitting on my computer with like 32 gig of RAM on the board.
Yeah. You get multi-gig hard drives, and you go to the electronics store or something, and you get external hard drives 2 to 4 terabyte of storage.
I've got 4 of those on my computer right now, Jeffrey.
Oh,
So yeah, we've looked at this. We've looked at the moon. The lunar dust they've discovered actually has a property in it that ruins people's lungs. Mars has enough water that maybe might sustain life. Europa certainly has enough water to sustain life.
And it's got a big monolith on there now.
And it got some big monolith,
After 2010,
and water, of course, you could probably convert to propellant of some sort. Because that's what it is, yeah. So we could push further out into space. And before we got on the air, my comment was, we're pushing so far out. How long before we start to see aliens push in?
And that's going to be a real good question. You'll have individuals out there right now who said they already have been pushing back in, that they're already there. You listen to somebody like Robert Bigelow, he says they're here already, but he won't disclose what he has, so it's kind of cryptic.
Well, because he's probably paying them and he doesn't want to get in trouble for these underpaying them or something, wage gap and all that.
That's it,
And they'll probably just call them illegal aliens. So
that's true. But I'm really hoping it's going to be within our lifetime now that we see some major breakthrough, that the people in the khaki fatigues and the black suits and ties with the sunglasses can't stop and can't deny anymore.
So do you think that he gets a lot of his information from people who had worked for the government and brought, I would say, secrets over to him? I mean, the government's got to have all kinds of stuff that they was working on stuff, but yet they still don't want the public to know about it. So now it comes out to where it's not governed by the government, and these people are building stuff that's going to work better than what the government's been building.
Well, they're not limited by the same factors on there. When you think about developing something, the government's going to test something over and over and over again because they're thinking about their next budget coming in.
Right.
They have to make sure this works for the next budget. Otherwise, they may slash our funding on there. So they've got to produce results. And then they're limited by, I guess you could say, the brain trust. Okay, we get this person to build the rocket, we get this person to do this, where private industries out there being more aggressive. They're thinking outside the box. They're going to people like Stephen Hawking and saying, in theory, how would you do this?
So
to me,
if they take and build something, then do they sell it to the government for the government to launch it, or are they going to launch it and do everything else also?
I think it's going to stay private. Because if you think about it, if it stays private, they're the ones who can make the money off of it. If the government gets a hold of it, there goes maybe their cash cow.
So then if they fly somebody back up to the moon and they put a stake on the moon and say, okay, I've conquered this is ours.
Well, let's go beyond that. You said, Barbara, like the space dust. Let's say they do bring back different artifacts, dust, rocks. Maybe they find drills. They drill down deeper into the soil. Maybe they find water. Who knows what they find? Maybe they find mineral deposits up there that are in quantities. What if they hit? I mean, just going really reaching up this one. What if they hit something like gold or silver out there? What could
or diamonds?
Or diamonds? What if they brought something like that back? Because I mean, there's been reports of certain extraterrestrial bodies that may be full of diamonds out there because of their initial analysis.
Well, didn't I read or hear about some of the dust that's come back from the moon on different articles has now affected the people, caused some kind of problems with lung or disease or something?
Well, you're not supposed to snort it.
Well, there has been problems. That came out about, I think, a week ago, wasn't it, Barbara? That report came out, something
I
like
believe
that.
so, yeah.
That they were talking about it affecting some of the astronauts who were on the moon.
Right.
Because you think about it, I mean, here they're up on the moon. They had their spacesuits on when they were outside, but once they got back in the lunar module, they took off their spacesuits. You'd certainly have to have the dust and things on the floor.
Right.
Yep.
And that would be.
And once you have your protective stuff off, how difficult must it be to resist saying, I'm touching something that's not of Earth?
They had to. I mean, just human curiosity.
Yeah. And how many horror movies start like that?
Yeah, the same as what. Now, tell me this, Jeffrey. Would you have taken one of the rocks and had to put it in your bare hand?
It almost would have been second nature. I wouldn't have even thought twice because I would want to feel what the texture felt like.
And you would have been bouncing that thing up in your hand in that 1/6 gravity.
Yeah, microgravity. Yeah.
Microgravity on there. It to me, human nature would almost make you want to do it without a doubt. And you think about those earlier astronauts breathing the dust in and what may have happened. I remember once they came back that they immediately rushed them off the helicopter into the Airstream trailer.
Yeah, the quarantine, yeah.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, yeah, I've been on that Airstream trailer. It's sitting on the USS Hornet.
Oh, yeah.
Along with a copy of the actual space capsule.
Ooh.
And what they live for a week, was it? I think it was a week of quarantine. Was amazing.
I hope they remember to install a bathroom in it.
They
did.
Good. But it was like the size of a small camping trailer.
Yeah. Wow. That's what it really was. That was an Airstream. I'm positive it was an Airstream.
Yeah.
Camping trailer. Let's just put them in there. Let's put some duct tape around the edges, maybe, and
seal
them in quarantine.
Hope there's no pandemic. And
that's right.
Well, I think it's about time to take us a quick little break, and when we come back, we will have a ticket giveaway for Mid-South. So be about, 3 or 4 minutes. Won't be real long. Jeff, won't you take us out?
Yes, well, you're listening to Paranormal View on para-x.com with your hosts Henry Foister, Ceiling Cat Barbara Duncan, and myself, Jeffrey Gould, with tonight's always excellent, wonderful guest, Thomas Wertman. So stay tuned for more of the Paranormal View after the break.
Whether you're listening at home, at work, or anywhere, Thanks for making Para-X part of your day. Your source for everything paranormal, Para-X.
And welcome back, everybody, right here to the Paranormal View on the Parax Radio Network. I want to thank everybody tonight listening to the show here in the chat room and those from around the world. We appreciate each and every one of you. And speaking of those from around the world, Barbara, where do we have listeners at tonight?
Tonight they're coming in literally from all over the globe. We have listeners in the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, and Japan is joining
All
us.
right. They're wanting to find out about UFOs, aren't they? And all the other good stuff that we have that we're talking about. Tonight, I'm going to give away 2 tickets to Mid-South Paranormal Convention, which is held July 27th, 28th, and 29th. And I'm going to do it this way. I'm not going to be asking a hard question. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say Barbara is watching our the Paranormal View at gmail.com website. And I'm going to take the first 2 people who send us a message saying that they would like a ticket for Mid-South. And what I will need from you will be your email address, your full name, and where you're from, because I don't have the tickets, but Keith Age will be contacting you to make arrangements for the tickets. So the first 2 people that sends us an email to the Paranormal View at gmail.com and say they want a ticket will get a ticket for Mid-South. It's for the whole 3-day weekend. So now's a chance to actually get a ticket and be able to go to a big convention. And I mean, there's usually a lot of people there.
You might want to clarify that the weekend is July 27th through the 29th, so that people can say, yeah, I won I can't go. You know.
Well, I did say it was 27th, 28th.
Oh, did you? Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
I had to look up the site.
Okay. We're getting back. We've been talking about. Did you have more on that one, Barbara? Or?
Oh, I could talk all night about space.
Oh, well, that's what we're going to be
There's
talking
so much about space. It's so huge. Come on.
It's so big.
I actually read an article.
There?
I love articles. Cracked has some very interesting articles, you know, where people think one thing, especially with what movies promote, and then this is what real life is. And they point out in science fiction movies like Empire Strikes Back, we're always convinced that asteroid fields are these clusters of rocks, and that going through an asteroid field is really difficult. But apparently in real life, asteroids are almost planetary bodies apart. They're like, if you go through an asteroid field, you're sort of like, oh, wait, was that it? Oh.
So you mean
Never tell me the odds.
So you mean I can't hide behind those things like in the movies?
Well, that's if you have a Star Destroyer to hide behind. So. Well, you were talking about the way the government was building, you know, rockets and everything back in the day. It reminded me there's a great line in the movie Armageddon where Bruce Willis and Steve Buscemi are about to launch, and Steve Buscemi just goes, "Hey, you realize we're sitting on 45,000 pounds of fuel, 1 nuclear warhead, and a thing that has 270,000 moving parts, all built by the lowest bidder."
And that statement was so true.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just reading in space news that they're now looking at helium as a propellant.
Really?
Well, I thought you were thinking going into a balloon would be rather dangerous.
Yeah. But it has to be fueled while the astronauts are already boarded, which is an interesting concept.
Oh, you mean it can't be in a storage tank or something?
No, they have to actually load it while the astronauts are strapped in.
In case it automatically goes off.
Or they just want to hear.
No,
they just want to hear them talk funny.
But I found the real reason why we're going into space, and I discussed this before. This is on the Physics and Astronomy Facebook page. 10,000 light years away from Earth, there's a huge cloud of alcohol.
There you go.
It is 1,000 times larger than the diameter of our solar system and contains enough alcohol to fill 400 trillion pints.
Really?
To drink all of it, everybody on Earth would have to drink 300,000 pints a day for 1 billion years.
I guess that explains why the Shire is in the space program now. I guess.
Yeah, there you go.
But doesn't that depend on what nationality you are? Certain nationalities drink a higher percentage, don't they?
That's why I made the Hobbit reference.
It sounds to me like that it's one big party.
Barbara, we're talking.
Well,
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
We were talking earlier about, that out in space finding things. I mean, the discoveries. I mean, here you're talking about the helium, you're talking about the alcohol. I mean, what are they going to find in the next 5 years out there?
You know what they say, in space nobody can hear you drink.
Oh.
Well, they also discovered that, I forget if it's at the center of the galaxy or I believe it's the center of our galaxy, that it smells like raspberries.
No, I didn't see that one.
Oh, no. Is that
like
what
It's made of a certain chemicals bind that actually smells like raspberries.
Okay.
I'll have to check.
Isn't there supposed to be a black hole in the center of the galaxy or galaxy or something?
Yeah, there is, but around the galaxy is not quite at the exact center.
We're kind of okay for right now.
Yeah. I've got to look that one up. That's an interesting one there. I have not seen that. I mean,
the center of the universe is giving you the raspberry.
Oh.
Crap. Sorry.
Well, I got are they here? Is a question everybody asks. Consider the comments of Edgar Mitchell on Apollo 14 astronaut in a conversation with WPTV, a West Palm Beach TV station. Tim Malloy, reporter, told the home viewers, he says the government he served in the military and as an astronaut is perpetrating cover-ups of alien sightings going all the way back to the legendary July 9th, 1947 Roswell incident. An alleged alien spacecraft crash where remains were allegedly discovered. Mr. Mitchell explained the reason for the denial is, number one, they didn't know if they were hostile and could we protect ourselves from them. And they didn't want the Soviets to know, so they devised a lie about it and covered it up. At Roswell, Air Force officers first turned in reports that they discovered parts and debris from a flying disc that had crashed. Later, they came out with an official report that said the debris came from a downed weather balloon. This was the beginning of many times the U.S. government would cover up UFO sightings and paranormal phenomena. Researcher Leslie McNay reported in an article in Gallup Poll Monthly that 71% of the people surveyed express a belief that the U.S. government knows more about UFOs than it publicly admits.
Well, it's also gotten to the point that the lie has been going on for so long, they're sort of like, well, we can't admit it now because then no one will trust us, as though anyone trusts, government.
Yeah, and you're right, Jeffrey, because if it's kind of like, let's see, how's that saying go? When first we practice to deceive.
What a web of lies. It's Shakespeare.
What a tangled web.
Yeah, when first we practice to deceive.
Yep.
It's kind of like it's snowballed now over all these years.
Oh, yeah.
They start out with a lie, and there could be multiple reasons why they may have done something like, I mean, they were coming out of World War II. They didn't necessarily trust the Russians at that point, and then they saw the Russians developing technologies like with Sputnik and so forth out there. So on one hand, you'd want to provide disinformation so they don't know what we really have. So on one hand, you could play it off as a UFO. Oh, yeah, this is a UFO, and maybe it's, that you recovered some satellite or something from a foreign government. Oh, it was a UFO over this area. No, we actually recovered a satellite. But on the flip side, you don't want them to know that we've really recovered anything on there. because they may say, wait a minute, they've got technology now we don't have. And we want to be the first ones of that technology. So there's so many reasons they could start providing all that disinformation out there. And another factor is, as I've told people for a number of years, that in this field, I have people telling me almost every day, well, if there were aliens here, I could accept the fact if they came out. Well, not necessarily. It depends on what all their intentions really are. What are their true intentions? Maybe the government knows way more about their intentions than we do. And maybe they're kind of like saying, we don't want you to know what they're really here for. It could be going back to, since we bring up a lot of movies and TV shows, it could be going back to the Twilight Zone To Serve Man episode. Where this book that they're thinking is here to benefit man, called To Serve Man, we're thinking it's here to benefit man, but it's actually a cookbook.
Yep.
I've seen that episode, I don't know, 2 or 3 different times.
Oh, and I met Richard Kyle, who was in it. He was, without a doubt, a big man.
Oh, yeah.
My head was in between his 2 hands like a baseball. Nice gentleman. But
So here's my question. I mean, do you think it's sort of like a Game of Thrones in which people are trying to ally themselves, thinking that they're going to have a better shot at allying themselves with aliens to be on the upper hand of, say, global domination if it came to that?
I think he could. And I just, let's say governments, but what about private organizations, industry? If we can somehow connect with these people and ally with them, what's our benefit, you know? What's our we could come out on top of everything. There's so many ways to look at it, but I knowing our government, other governments, I cannot deny that they wouldn't be out there saying, let's try to create a relationship with these individuals so we can become the dominant one on top should they move forward.
Well, and I think you kind of get to the Elon Musks of the world, which are trying to escape what humanity's done to the planet, and those reaching out there to draw in aliens to incorporate them into our planet. Almost kind of a duality there.
You have the ones who, you've got the faction who thinks that they're going to come here and save the world. I mean, we're destroying the environment. I mean, you look on the internet and you see pictures of all this plastic they're digging out of the oceans. You hear discussions about where they've taken samples of water from the Mississippi and they found at least 5 particles of plastic inside of the sample. You see
they just have mollusks that they pulled out of the bay in Oregon that has so much opium,
right,
and opioids into it that they can't eat it.
Yeah.
And then you had, what was it, the antelope that had all the fishing gear stuck on its head.
Yeah.
It's like, how bad are we polluting the environment out there? And you've got the faction that thinks that, they're going to come here and save us. They may be looking at us like, you're the one destroying your own world. You've got one of the greatest worlds out there.
And we don't want you coming out into space destroying ours. Which takes us to Stanton Friedman. He's a nuclear physicist and is concerned there have been multiple visitations of Earth by aliens who will ultimately quarantine us here on Earth. The Canadian claimed there was not a shadow of doubt the existence of intelligent aliens was being covered up by global governments as part of a so-called truth embargo. Mr. Friedman, 82, is a top ufologist who has been at the heart of investigations into the mysterious Roswell alleged UFO crash of 47, and after previously working on classified projects for American Aerospace Corporation McDonnell Douglas, speaking to dailystar.co.uk, he said, "We have enough to prove without a shadow of a doubt that planet Earth is being visited by aliens. This is kept from people because who would want the world in upheaval? There would be mass panic and distress. If they, the aliens, want to make themselves known, it's easy. They will. He said recently declassified CIA files and UFO sightings were all part of the proof. So why does he say they are here? Mr. Friedman says aliens actually want to prevent humans colonizing space and will ultimately quarantine us here for the greater good to prevent mankind traveling. He said, I think they are here. I think they are here to quarantine us and keep us from going out there. With our track record, we're evil. But Mr. Friedman claims our governments are trying to take advantage of aliens being here by obtaining their technology to achieve world supremacy. He said the first country to replicate alien technology will rule the roost if they can build it.
And Stanton, he used to go out and do what we call the circuit, speaking engagements all over the country, almost every weekend. Stanton's kind of stepping back now from that after all these years. I've got articles from him from like 1960s. Remember in the 1960s, he thought in a few years we're going to have all this information released about UFOs, and it still hasn't happened. But going to his topics on there, I look at this when you talk about quarantining it at the speed that we're advancing into space. I don't think they have to really rush about quarantining us right now based on our current technologies. I mean, we're just talking about the nanoprobes, which could take maybe 20 years to get to one of the closest stars. So I don't think they're going to really panic right away about quarantining us. I think, if anything, they would just monitor us on what we're doing, what our progress is. And that can be done right here on Earth. They may be actually among us right now, for all I know. They may be walking among us as hybrids. I mean, there's been talk about it out there. There are hybrids out there. They could be watching our activities on a daily basis. And he's right about the fact of if a government should get a hold of some of that technology and be able to reverse engineer it, they could be on top of everything. I've been telling people for a long time that if they discovered artifacts, let's say at Roswell, initially the newspaper article came out about Roswell where, yes, they found something, there was a UFO crashed, and all of a sudden the stories were changed. And there were reports of the artifacts being ferreted away to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. That's an area that's head of foreign technologies, as it's called. And I guess you can't get much more foreign than that, you know. And my thought is they've always had this talk of the mysterious hangar down there. Well, the mysterious hangar down there isn't that far from where the museum sits at. And I was over in that vicinity a few times with some groups. We went in to tour the facility. And I know one thing is the security guards didn't appreciate the fact of looking at them saying, tell me where the aliens are. When I did that to one of the military police, he really didn't look at me very nice. But the thing is, I mean, if you're going to put something there, to me, based on our technology right now, if we got something in 1947, there's no way in heck that we could reverse engineer anything that advanced with 1947 technology. Here we are, 2018. Do we even now have the technology to go back and reverse engineer an object of that much advanced properties on it? Because you're going to be looking at the metallurgical qualities of craft if it's composed of metal. You're going to be looking at how the energy source, how it's powered, how it moves, how it's even operated. If we found out that thing is being controlled by, let's say, a mental telepathic means, not by hand controls, humans may not have the capability of controlling that object out there. So, I mean, yes, we may have the ability to build it, but if we can't operate it because we don't have the mental capacity required, it's another limitation. I mean, So that's why I said if you have anything, you recovered it, put it below ground, you bury it down there basically, and you work for decades on reverse engineering or to whenever you can.
Well, there was an article I recently came across. I'm not sure if I posted it on Paranormal View on Facebook, but I forget if it was like operating a computer or something through EKG, like a skull cap that reads your EKGs and reads your mind and knows what you're wanted to do. But there's also been theories that all of the cool technologies that we now do have may be because of the stuff they found, like in the Roswell crash and other crash saucers, as simple as cell phones, things like that. Certainly smartphones, because they're flipping computers in our hands. They're hardly ever used as phones anymore.
Well, exactly. I mean, mine's in my hand probably at least 25% of the day doing things. But on the other hand, though, I don't want to sell the human race short, though, either. I mean, because we are a very inventive race overall. Yeah. And if you went back and you took technology backwards based on the normal development, I think we probably would be at the same point. Because isn't it, I believe, the Moore principle, where technology doubles roughly about every 2 years? And if you took that backwards, we would be at that same point that we were probably about 1947.
Well, now, if they're doing like what Stanton was saying, they didn't want us to go into space, and the way he was saying about whichever government was able to figure stuff out, they would be able to rule a roost, which means they'd be warring against everybody else. Do you think that the aliens are slipping Russia some stuff, or slipping China some stuff, and slipping us some stuff to see who can figure something out first, and then everybody else is going to want to go to war with them, which means we're destroying everybody on the planet ourselves, and then the aliens don't have to worry about us going out into space?
Interesting concept. It would make a great movie.
Yeah, really.
If it hasn't been done already.
Of course, when you look back at the types of aliens that are out there, that we had the sort of anamorphic alien, and you read reports now where the Y chromosome is basically disappearing. And it makes me kind of wonder if some of these time travelers are aliens aren't just time travelers trying to pick that Y chromosome back up again for the species.
And that could be. I mean, I'm very open about the fact that, I study UFOs out there, but I can't deny the fact that it could be somebody coming from the future, interdimensionally on there. And you're right.
Well, it would make sense with the hybrid.
Sure. It would make sense that they're not from another world. They're actually from our future, coming back to try to save their own race by pulling these. Because if you look going back to the Betty and Barney Hills stories and going forward, they were looking at the female, especially extracting eggs, in theory, and doing experimentation along those lines. And what, are they doing something for genetic purposes on there?
And at the time when they were doing the experience through her navel, they explained to Betty, this is something. They apparently implied it was a standard medical procedure, but it hadn't been used by modern science at that time for another decade or so.
Right. That hadn't been developed at that point. It didn't come on until, like I say, about a decade later. And that's when that procedure came out. So it's like, where did she come up with that from?
Yeah.
If she's making it up, then she had a really good mind for making stuff up.
Exactly. Well, also, when they showed her the star chart and she said, well, where are you from? They say, well, do you know which star is yours? And she said, no. He says, then you're not going to have a frame of reference. But she remembered the star chart, and some teacher managed to extrapolate in 3 dimensions what the star field would look like looking at Earth from somewhere else, and that's how she came up with it being Zeta Reticuli.
And when I heard that, I thought, man, that's a great concept that's right in front of us, because we look at space as we would from Earth. But you have to remember, another race it may be coming from Alpha Centauri or wherever, they're being looking from a totally different point of view. So you have to look at the stars in a three-dimensional pattern.
Yep. And some of the stars that she saw in the star chart hadn't yet been discovered by us.
Right. I've been involved with like 3D designing and engineering for years. And to me, that made sense right away. To bring out another great movie on there with Kevin Spacey.
K-Pax?
K-Pax?
Where he did the similar thing where he showed a star system that they had just discovered and nobody knew anything about this, and he gave all the mathematics behind it on how it moved.
Yeah, no one's going to be Netflixing that for a while, unfortunately, now.
No, it used to be a great. I used to love to watch that movie. Now it's kind of going on the back shelf along with House of Cards.
Suddenly it's K-Pax with Christopher Plummer. And
that's it.
Well, it's also interesting that if they're showing star charts from somewhere else, and they are from somewhere else, and the distance that it takes for them to get here, unless they have faster than the speed of light technology, the star charts are going to be off, because we see the stars in a different time zone than what they actually are.
That's right.
So why is it when they do pick somebody up and run a couple tests on them that it always hurts the people because they never use anything to kind of like numb it? Yeah, don't knock them out or anything.
To me, I really think it goes back to maybe they don't have emotions like we do.
Well,
or they don't understand the concept of pain.
That's true. They may not, to them, it may not exist on there. They may not feel pain. They may be totally emotional, and they, not to be robotic, but maybe they're moving in a robotic manner, basically. They have no feelings. They're not programmed for feelings. They're not programmed to respect pain. All they're being programmed for is, this is what we want, this is what you will do, and this is how you go about doing it, period.
And maybe they're not human kind of things. Maybe they're more of a robot, so they wouldn't have any feelings anyway.
And I've heard people describing them in that manner, that they moved in almost like a robotic manner, that they also sense no emotions on there. Mm. And they could also be looking at us no different than an animal. Well, that'd be pretty blunt.
And of course, taking into account if they're robotic and given, not humanoid, but, like the gray, this is probably what our biological forms look like, but they're robotic versions of them. The fact that they move robotically gives them a body language that is so off that it's what makes people seem so creeped out by them, because they're not moving in an organic way.
You're right. And I mentioned to Barbara, too, earlier, that some have been reported to move extremely fast. It's always been said that Steven Spielberg's had inside information for years. Ooh. And when he did his miniseries Taken, he presented a lot of different aspects of this field from all different sides, going from the Foo Fighters, World War II on up. And he portrayed one of the beings as moving extremely fast. Well, one of the comments that somebody made was, maybe they don't have a bone type structure. Maybe it's more like a cartilage, almost like a shark.
Wow.
And that would allow them to move in a different type of a manner than what we would.
All right, we're going to take a quick, maybe 3-minute break. And because I still got lots of stuff, and Barb said she's got another hour's worth, so we'll be fighting with time probably. So, Jeff, why don't you take us out for a quick little break?
Yeah, well, you're listening to the Paranormal View on para-x.com with your hosts Henry Foister, Ceiling Cat, Barbara Duncan, and myself, Jeffrey Gould, with tonight's always wonderful and excellent guest, Thomas Wertman. So stay tuned for more of the Paranormal View after the break.
Para-X Radio, programming for the open mind.
And welcome back, everybody, right here to the Paranormal View on the Parax Radio Network. I want to thank everybody for being with us tonight. Those in the chat room and those listening from around the world, we appreciate each and every one of you. Want to welcome back Jeffrey Gould. Maybe.
Hello, yes, it would help if I turned off the mute.
And Barbara Duncan.
I'm still here.
And our guest, Thomas Wertman.
Yay. I'm still here, and I unmuted mine first.
Now, did we get any emails yet, Barbara?
Nothing yet.
Nothing yet. I'll say it one more time. If you want a ticket to go to Mid-South, which is held July 27th, 28th, 29th, and that ticket covers everything except your hotel and food. Great
and travel.
place. Yeah, and travel. But it's free to get in, and lots of people are going to be there, and you'll have a great time. Trust me. So just all you got to do is send us a email and say you'd like a ticket for Mid-South, and put your name, your email address, and where you live, and Keith will get in contact with you to tell you where your ticket's going to be at or how you get it and all that good stuff. So, all right. Not too many times we pass out free stuff like that, but it's a good show, good event. All right, Barbara, our time's going to run out before we get too much done. Have you got another one you want to talk about before I go to another one?
Well, I was thinking about, going back to the Mars colonization and whether or not anybody would actually sign up for that. And if so, why? Because I don't think after living there for a while you would even be able to come back to Earth. And it certainly wouldn't be Earth-like.
No, I couldn't understand why they'd want to try and colonize Mars anyway. I mean, there's nothing there, I don't think.
Not yet. That's why it's going to be terraformed.
Well, it depends on who you talk to. I mean, there's certain people out there in the UFO community that said they've been there for 17 years already.
There you go.
Okay.
If I'd say there's certain ones out there, do I say I believe them? Not necessarily, but that's some of their claims. But it could be on there, Henry, that they want to make the claim that they're one of the first people to be in that colony. But you're right. I mean, it can be very much a one-way trip, and that's it, Now,
I know that they're about to send up a lightweight helicopter.
That's plans on one of the upcoming missions, that it's a very small one. It's not very big.
Would it be more like a drone?
It's going to act somewhat like a drone. And it's going to have limited flight on how far it can really go. And if I remember correctly, because I read probably the same article you did, Barbara, about a week or so ago, that they're planning on having this fly a short distance away. Number one, to test the abilities of even flying, period. And I don't know if it's so much on there, Jeffrey is using it like a drone for exploring, but as much as feeling out the possibility for future missions on what they can really do with that technology on there. It's more of an experiment that they'll try it like maybe 3 flights, 5 flights, something like that. But then again, look what happened to the Mars rovers and how long they lasted. So it could be a continuing thing if they find out it has power to be able to do it.
Well, if the powers run like off the sun, solar powered, it should last quite a while.
That's its intentions. It's going to be solar powered. It'll have the ability to basically land and recharge itself based on the time of year on how effective it's going to be. Then go a short distance from one of the rovers and then return back. And again, I think it was like 3 flights, maybe 5 flights to test out initially its capabilities. But, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, a year or 2 later, taking what they've learned from that experience, they could develop something way, way beyond that first flight. That could.
I mean, part of the problem with Earthbound avionics is the gravity, the air, etc. And I know you'd have to probably modify the propellers of some sort to be able to adapt to a thinner atmosphere. But it certainly seems to me once it's in the air, because we know Mars has an atmosphere and a wind, that it should actually project pretty darn far.
Correct. It's got the atmosphere. It's just, and you're right, it's got the less gravity. So it's combining both of those together on there to see how effective it's going to be. But I think it's going to be a very interesting thing because right now there's areas that they can't get to that well with the rovers. This would expand out to be able to go into different areas and maybe much farther, much faster than what they could if they can prove that technology out.
Stop stepping on the dog.
I knew you were going to hear that. That was my stepson coming in the back door. My dog loves him.
Sounds like a dog.
Oh.
Yeah, my dog loves him. I say that sarcastically. But I think it's going to be a great step forward. Also, along with that, they're having a drill that's going to go down about 3 feet on one of the upcoming rovers on there. So then they're going to be able to explore the soil much deeper than what they have, too. So I think that's going to be...
3 whole feet, wow.
Yeah. And
that's pretty darn good.
That's good. I mean, compared to what they've done so far, I mean, it's a big step forward. They also had the other day where they were testing out the largest parachute that they've had for landing a Mars craft. That was about a week ago they tested it. And the test, if I remember right, was successful.
Somebody threw them down, they've seen a UFO then, right?
I don't doubt that.
Well, I think part of the reason, too, is one of the ideas of colonization was to actually colonize inside a cavern of some sort that would protect it from solar radiation and Martian storms.
That would be an ideal way to do it. Because when you transport something from here, like let's say the things that Bigelow's basically building, is almost like an inflatable balloon. And it's not going to be able to keep out all the harmful rays and everything else. So you're right, below ground would be the best option. As long as you don't have some of the things on Mars that they were underground they talked about.
Yeah, like, hello.
That's right.
We live here.
That's right, like some of the big worms, something like that in Dune and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There you go.
You see, I was always hoping for the Martian Chronicles and, you know, the Mars canals and all of that sort of thing. But
right. Didn't happen.
No.
But I think that would be a good choice in there, Barbara, if they can find caves, underground caverns on there, something that provides more protection if they are seriously thinking about doing that. To me, I just think that's a long ways off. And like you, Henry, I wouldn't want to be the first one to volunteer to go out and do that.
Nope. However, we did have somebody for that. You probably know about it. Do you remember astronaut Gordon Cooper?
Yes.
He, many UFO enthusiasts, Gordon Cooper is a legend, an original Mercury astronaut. He's one of those clear-eyed, ambitious, optimistic, straight arrow Americans with the right stuff, which there was a movie made with that. Let's see, Cooper was going to go to the moon. But Alan Shepard went instead. And then Apollo program was canceled. Cooper was going to go to Mars, too. Few Americans ever known that NASA was well along on plans for a manned Mars mission with a landing projected for 1981. Cooper was in line for commander of the mission, and it would have been a nuclear-powered spacecraft assembled in Earth orbit after parts were sent aloft on a series of Saturn 1B's rockets. The nuclear engines were ready. Cooper said a lot of the spacecraft was ready. They were still working on the lander, he said, and then that program was canceled too. by Senator Proxmire, the worst enemy America ever had. I asked, now this is the guy that's interviewing Cooper. He says, I asked him about his famous UFO sighting. It was in 1951 over Germany. He and several other pilots flying F-86 jets. We were supersonic, barely, he said, when they looked up and saw what appeared to be a large group of double tentacular-shaped aircraft, classic flying saucers, flying in formation. He said these craft were much higher than the plane could go, though he couldn't tell how high. They were going faster, too, though he couldn't tell how much faster. Over the next 2 or 3 days, he and other pilots saw several hundred of these craft. Cooper said they flew formation maneuvers very much like his own squadron would fly. He and other witnesses were uniformly convinced they were seeing a technology that wasn't human. It goes on.
Yeah, but, I'm sorry, but just because we haven't recognized the technology, I mean, how many people saw a flying wing and thought it was alien?
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just because we haven't seen it before.
And
I'm sure that there's a lot of things we haven't seen yet in our arsenal.
And even though maybe not over Germany, but Cooper was involved in back at Edwards Air Force Base when he got into NASA. And that's where they had a lot of the test pilots and so forth out at Edwards.
Well, all the NASA astronauts originally were Air Force pilots.
Right? Not all Air Force, some were Navy. And I think also Glenn was Marines. If I remember.
I didn't know there were Marines pilots.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. But, as we look at colonization of, say, like Mars, etc., because we're trying to find ways to adapt that. And I know Stanton Freeman has a book out about undersea UFOs. Is that perhaps what they're doing is exploring different aspects to see how well they can adapt to our world as well?
There's been stories along where I'm at up here in Ohio that there's underground, or I should say underwater UFOs out there on Lake Erie. Lake Erie's a number of spots is actually very shallow, which make it difficult to hide something. But number one, if you've got areas where there are deeper areas out there, that's plausible. Number one would be a good area to hide during the day, so nobody would see where you're at. And then you come out at night. I had a witness over on the west side of Cleveland that observed one come out of the water, came directly over his head, and he was able to shine a flashlight at it to illuminate the surface of it as it went over his head before it disappeared. And we don't know the true intentions of an object like that going underwater, but number one, it could be a great place to hide. Number two, you're right, they could be evaluating their environment. I mean, if you think about it, they could be going underwater, testing out, seeing what pressures are down there, what creatures are down there, what environments are down there. They could be exploring our world just like we would be exploring Europa or someplace like that.
Because I guess the question is when we go colonize, you go to any island, for example, what you look for is shelter, food, sustainability. And it seems to me that, they could look for shelter underwater if that's what their culture is. But also, they hover around power plants a lot, too. So would that be the fuel?
That's a possible source where they could be drawing it from, because we've had sightings reported over on the western side of Cleveland, out towards the Sandusky area, actually, where there's a nuclear power plant of UFOs being seen over the power plant. I've got more reports from that side of Cleveland than the east side. There's another nuclear power plant out that way.
Well, now, does the power plants ever report anything of a loss in power or spike in power or anything?
Not that we've seen any losses in power, but then again, you'd have to be able to get access to get those reports. And we haven't been able to get that. What we've talked about doing, though, is trying to get some technology to monitor the area above the power plant visually. to see if anything can be observed out there. And then also put some equipment out potentially to look for any electronic effects, electromagnetic fields, anything like that changes an area also, if you can get something close enough.
And I also hate to bring this up because it's really morbid, but cattle mutilations, maybe they want to have cheeseburgers too. Trying to figure out if that is the...
This is the stuff we can't eat. Here you go. We'll give it back.
The food source, well, I mean, they're looking at food sources, so I'm trying to figure out, I mean, are they following sort of like what we would follow as far as protocol goes to find out if life is sustainable for them?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think they would follow the protocols we do. I mean, they're going to be based on their own norms. But some of the cattle mutilations on there, I haven't done a direct investigation on it. I haven't seen one here in Ohio. We've had some people report potential deer being downed in fields. But the thing it's hard to discern is it a natural thing? And the effects of the deer after like 2 days that you find it 2-3 days later is quite a bit of damage at that point.
Predation and all, yeah.
Exactly. And one of my friends who reported some of these to me is a big one for reaching on some of the stories.
Kind of over speculating, is it?
Yeah, over speculating on there. And sometimes they listen to too many other people out there that discuss this subject openly at different events. I won't mention their names, but they're big into things like the cattle mutilations and stuff out there. I would be one that I would like to see some of this stuff directly myself to base my own opinion, and then talk to other experts in those related fields on there to say, number one, is it something that is a natural thing? Is this definitely something that is a true mutilation? Or is this just somebody's opinion that this was a mutilation based on certain facts? Because I know certain ones who do the talks on these, some of them I think are really kind of reaching on their evidence. That's why I'd like to talk to people, veterinarians, other individuals out there who know the effects of these animals when they go down. Because let's see, what was the horse's name years and years ago?
Mr. Ed? Oh, wait, no.
No, not that one.
Not Trigger either, I bet.
No.
So
it wasn't looking for Wilbur. Wilbur. But there was a horse years ago that was involved in one of the earlier incidents. And again, they were basing all the claims on the fact it was killed by a UFO, basically, that there were cuts that were done with laser type precision. Mm-hmm. Me, I'm one of those. It's kind of like I'm from Missouri. Prove it to me.
Right.
Show me.
Mm-hmm.
Get me the people to back up that this is something that's not done. I mean, could maggots eat the tissue in such a way out there that it makes it appear like their claims are? Because a couple of ones, again, making these claims, I just think that their evidence is a little bit weak. They're based more on opinion than, okay, let's bring some specialists in that are very familiar with animal forensics.
Yeah, they're trying to make the facts fit with their narrative as opposed to the other way around.
Exactly. Because just to basically come out and say that in their conversation, I almost guarantee you they'll say at some point, well, if you go to my website and you check this out for a nominal fee, you'll find out more information. So they're also making a living off of this.
Sure. Well, Skinwalker Ranch had that issue, I believe.
Yeah, and Skinwalker Ranch did, and now it's under a different name, but it doesn't mean it's still not owned by Bigelow. But the ownership is now different. Point. It's a different name on it. But
what are they doing at the ranch then?
Well, at that ranch, they also claimed that they had mutilations happening out there. Now, again, everything, you're just hearing stories that he said, she said, and so forth on there.
No proof.
No proof. Show me direct evidence on here. Show me that this is the animal you've taken in, a veterinarian examined it X number of days, and give a whole pathological report on this animal. But you don't see that type of data being produced to the detail I'd want to see it.
Because this goes back decades.
Oh yeah, it's
Yeah.
the horse incident that goes back to, that had to be probably 1970s, if not before. And I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on the name of the horse, but it was one of those that made major news stories on there.
Was it a own horse?
I can't remember all the details about it. And you've got me wanting to look it up now.
A horse is a horse, of course, of course.
That's right.
Io Silver. Let's see.
Well, I was just thinking, from a forensic point of view, if you could figure out what's missing, some sort of
Snippy?
nutritional value.
Would it be Snippy the horse?
Snippy's the one. I'm pretty sure that's it.
That's why I've got a badger.
Yeah. But you're right, Barbara. If you knew what organs are being removed, if they're looking at certain parts of the body, you would have a better idea of what they're really looking for.
Or looking at.
Correct. I mean, if you obviously found certain portions of the cow disappeared, it could be appear that they're making steaks. You know that they're looking for the meat. But
if you're gonna name your horse Snippy, it's just asking to be mutilated, aren't you?
Yes, right.
It's an odd name for
yeah. But I would think if you're looking at certain glands, certain parts of the cows out there, that would give you a good indication on here. And to me, I would like to see the evidence that, okay, in this area we found this is what they're looking at. In this area of the country, they've done the same thing. Look for collaborating evidence, not just one random case out there.
Yeah, it's kind of odd. Well, I mean, you can kind of understand their interest in us, although I'm not aware of any human mutilations.
Well, it depends on who you talk to. Oh, yes. I remember being at a conference about 7 years ago now, 8 years ago maybe, and the individual doing a presentation was talking about two incidents. One happened in Pennsylvania, and the one in Pennsylvania, the name of the individual was Todd Sees, if I remember correctly. Todd Sees was supposedly took a like an ATV out and up on top of a mountain and disappeared. They sent people out to look for him. They didn't find him. And like several days later, they found his body nude, almost like it had been dropped from up above, according to reports, into like thickets, of which they didn't see him in that area earlier, and he was dead. There is a reported autopsy done, and in the autopsy report, again, this is per the reports. I'm not saying it's true or not, but per the reports that different ones claimed, the speakers claimed that day, he said, well, the brain, when it was examined, basically different parts of the brain were blowing out from pain because he was basically being dissected as he was alive.
Vivisected, you mean?
Dissected.
Isn't that the same thing?
Apart. Well,
I thought vivisection was that.
Yeah, whatever. But they took him apart.
Same thing.
In a very painful way.
They took him apart while he was breathing.
Exactly, in a very
Apparently
painful
he was
way.
being dissembled.
It was causing brain damage at that point because the intense pain he was under.
Did they put him back together?
No. At least that was reports. Now, some claim that they never released the reports. And there's all sorts of confusing stories on it. One of my other friends says the incident is not really true. To that degree, it wasn't like they claimed. So again, it's just one of those stories that you don't see direct evidence on. But again, this is a story that was being presented at a conference, like it was 100% fact. There was one even more extreme from out of Brazil under Jeffrey, where the individual also was reportedly taken apart.
And for future reference, having looked it up, the dissection is on the dead. Vivisection is cutting or operating on a living animal.
Okay, so I stand corrected.
Sorry. I wasn't sure either because I thought, what's the distinction? I looked it up.
Well, the guy in Brazil was, same thing.
Yeah.
Supposedly taken apart as he's alive. And these were human mutilations on there. Again, these were the claims, but again, Henry, it's like, where's the 100% evidence?
Right.
Where's the forensic reports?
Where's the? He's going out on a limb.
And as what was brought up in chat earlier, Kat was saying that maybe they don't understand what pain is anyway. They wouldn't recognize our screams as being that of pain.
And she may be right too, because they may not have emotions or sense pain as we know it. It just may not exist to them. And if they're robotic, that may not be part of their programming to understand.
We're just doing our job.
That's right. You're told to get from point A to point B and just do it the way you're told to do it. Period.
Now going back to this interview with Gordon Cooper, you can read it if you go to UFO evidence .news, .news, with astronaut Gordon Cooper. Just look him up and it'll show you where he says aliens are here. But they was interviewing him, and apparently back in the 50s, supposedly they had brought a live alien to one of the bases. Now, he didn't get to meet him, though. But later on, it says here that this guy by the name of Moser was going to introduce him to an alien, but didn't get to. And he asked, where is the visitor now? And Gordon said he doesn't know. Said the visitor learned to blend into human society and become a businessman, Moser said. And the guy said, why was the visitor here? And Gordon said Moser told him the visitor's people had been in space for a long time. They were a very old race, and their planet had died when their son died. They didn't want to invade or change our society. They just wanted to live on solid ground again. And Earth took some getting used to. But Moser's visitor friend had adjusted well. Presumably, there were many others, but Gordon didn't claim to know about that. So, again, he's saying, that they're here. And that could probably be a possibility that some of the aliens come from planets that were dying or dead and looking for another planet that they can live on.
Sure. Definite possibility out there.
But wouldn't they have to resemble humans quite a bit to be able to get by? I mean,
well, just to throw some theories out there, what if it's just not that the physical appearance may not be changing at all? We may be thinking they look totally different. So it may be in our mind that their appearance is changing, but they may still look the same as they originally did. Almost like, I guess you could say, like a cloaking type effect. But on the other hand, I mean, there's people out there reported that you've got these individuals did not act normal. They didn't understand normal concepts on there of certain things. Just to throw something at random out there that's not associated with the story, but what if you put one of these individuals in a room and they didn't understand the concept of a doorknob? Oh, yeah. How they get out. I mean, here they are. They may look like us, but they don't understand some basic concepts. I mean, I thought it was really wild when I did a talk the one time, and I had 3 individuals who didn't look quite right. They looked like albinos almost, but they moved in unison. When one turned, they all turned. One turned their head, they all turned their head. It was almost like they were connected together with like a cable on there. So maybe there's something to that. I won't deny that at all, that they're not here and they're not amongst us already.
Sort of like a pheromone-based brainwashing to a certain degree.
They're here. They look the same to themselves, but they don't look the same to us. They look more like a human to us, except certain characteristics they can't hide. I mean, you can put in another package, but the concept, their characteristics, you couldn't change.
Yeah, it would be like, I guess, here in America, if you see somebody from another country, Oriental or something like that, they look different to us. They would probably pass for, some other country or something that we don't necessarily see.
Sure.
So they could probably get away with it like that.
In today's age of people traveling all over the world, very likely.
Mm-hmm.
You could have somebody saying, yeah, I'm from China, but they're not.
But then what about the Greys and some of the other races that doesn't look human at all?
Well, I sent you my picture earlier.
See what you saw, and I'm telling you, if the people here in the chat room seeing it, they go bonkers.
Yeah, it's because it was one of those things that, in the past I've kind of talked a little bit about some of my background on there, some other experiences. And one night I just happened to be on the computer just kind of doing some mindless surfing around, and all of a sudden I came across that image. And it hit me so hard I broke down, almost started crying in front of my computer. And I was just sitting in front of the computer for probably an hour or more, just staring at the picture, losing it. Because it was bringing back kind of like a flashback of memories on there, some of the stuff that came out in regressions I'd been through. And the being that you saw in there from basically like just above the mouth there was what I remember seeing from roughly about a foot away. Don't tell your wife that, Henry. They'll really figure out. It was about a foot away.
She's listening.
She's listening. Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
She's in the chat room.
Yeah.
Lila.
But that was about a foot away, and the eyes themselves under Barbara were almost totally emotionless, is the best way to describe it. You're staring into them, and it's like 2 black pools that there's. When you look at a human, you're looking not just at the human being, but you're also watching the body language, the nonverbal communication.
Sure.
And looking at this, there was absolutely nothing. It was like staring at open space. There was nothing there, that really gave you any feeling of emotion whatsoever. And that's why on one hand, you felt that, is this robotic? Is one of my thoughts. And on the other hand, I thought, well, maybe if it's not robotic, maybe it's just doesn't understand the concept of emotions. It doesn't have any. It's almost like they've been totally bred or whatever word you want to use, removed from the race. We don't have a need for that.
That's really going to make a mess out of science fiction films where you try and have the love story and they're like, I do not understand what you're saying.
Yeah, we can't use that. We can't use that line. I can't go that direction with it. Okay, we can't have them show fear. That doesn't work either.
Well, that just helps during John Wick shootouts. They just stand there like, oh well.
Yeah, they're just there.
Ducks in a barrel. Yeah.
No humor, no nothing. But in my memories that came up through the regression, the only thing I sensed at one point was not the closest word I could use was startled. And again, here I'm talking about something potentially with no emotions. But at one point, what I did made it appear to be startled. and it reacted like this is not supposed to happen.
So startlement and surprise are possibly concepts within there, or it may be a form of confusion. Like you say, it's not supposed to happen. Like this goes against what we expect. That doesn't happen.
Right. And what the whole incident involved is in the regression I went through, I remembered laying on a table and I sat up. And I wasn't supposed to be able to sit up on my own. It was like you're being told you will lay down, you will not move, period. And all of a sudden I sat up and I started moving around. It's like, no, this is not supposed to happen. And like we talked about earlier, everything seemed to be more of a mental type of communication. And it kept trying to do everything it could mentally, not physically restrain me, but mentally tried to restrain me. And it couldn't do it. And it was almost like startled, bewildered, whatever, that this is not supposed to happen. And it didn't know how to react when it didn't have control.
They suddenly realized what WTF stands for.
That's right.
Now, were you unconscious or sleeping when this happened?
I was completely awake. I remembered laying down. I remembered looking all around the room without being able to move my head. And I could see like a dome-type facility, and I could see at one point a being standing on the far side of this room, just standing there, almost like it was, best way to describe it was almost like a sentry. It's just staying there. It's just watching from a distance. And then I looked over to one side, and I see one of these beings very close to me, and its eyes are almost directly in my face. And it's not talking to me, but I feel like there is a pathway between us. And at some point, I sit up on the table and I get the sense I'm being told, no, lay back down. You're not, no, lay down. And every time I kept trying to do that, I kept standing up. I said, wait a minute, this is the first time. And these experiences I've been through were a number of experiences. It wasn't just one. This is the first time that it no longer had control. And at this point, I was roughly right around the early teens. And I reacted like any rebel teenager would. You can't control me now, so what? What are you going to do about it? You're no longer in control.
Guess we'll have to shoot you.
And a good thing they didn't.
Exactly.
They opted for plan B, I'm glad. but it couldn't do anything about it. But then at some point, everything just kind of faded, almost like I went out of it again, in some manner. And I just totally lost concept. And we tried to go through and break through that point through regressions, and we were unable to. We couldn't get through that point. And the person who was doing the regressions with me had done a lot of them. And she said it was an extremely powerful block, whatever it was there. It wasn't letting her go farther, because every time we started getting that point, my heart rate, my breathing would go through the roof. And she was afraid with a guy at that point, right around 60 years old, she didn't want to have me have a heart attack in her house. That may not look good. Yeah,
so much paperwork.
That's right. Try to explain that one.
But does that suggest a non-adaptability on their part? I mean, if all of a sudden you start fighting back, one would think that they'd regroup and come back with something else.
You'd think. And over the years, I mean, I've always wondered that, was this like a thing that happened in these years and it's now gone? But all of a sudden, out of nowhere, then, Barbara, here comes a friend of mine telling me about a story. She says, hey, a friend of mine had a vision of being on board of a craft. Oh, what's that got to do with me? She goes, well, she saw somebody on the craft that sounded very, very much like you. Really? And then when she gave her a series of pictures, and I was the one she pulled out of the lineup. It's like, okay, first of all, don't let the wife know I'm on a spacecraft with a strange woman. Somebody I don't remember ever meeting.
Got a quick question in the chat room. Nyla wants to know, do you feel that you were in contact? It says, does Thomas feel he's in contact, have a mind meld while the alien, with the alien now? Does he get information since the experience?
There's been times I suspected information still going on back and forth, that there was a link that was established that day that has never been 100% broken. And that was one of the reasons that I felt later on that there were return visits, that they wanted to make sure that the link that was established that day, because what happened immediately after I sat up, I also felt I could see and hear everything, not just in a room, but everywhere. I could feel everything almost like being connected to a hive immediately. Yeah. And that was what it was trying to also shut down. It's like, this is not supposed to happen. This is not supposed to happen. He's connected into the hive. This is not supposed to happen. And I felt later on that the reason they kept coming back is to try to make sure that that was shut down, that they did try to do everything good.
That might be part of the reason the hypnosis gets blocked, because it's coming up against essentially a programming firewall.
Yeah, and that's it. It's hitting something on her, but I've done cases though, UFO investigations where I've seen everything in the witness's mind before they've ever said it. Oh. It's like, how does this freaking happen? I mean, come on, they haven't said a word to me, and all of a sudden I'm visualizing things. I'm seeing images in my mind of exactly what they're talking about. Or going to talk about.
So what they're actually seeing, the hive is seeing, is they're living people's lives through their eyes.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you can have one here, one in Alpha Centauri.
You've seen the movie Surrogates, right?
No.
It's a Bruce Willis film in the near future where people barely ever leave their apartments. They plug their consciousness into an android version of themselves, and they're able to go out and interact with other such androids, these surrogate models. And it almost sounds like if they're able to access your life experiences, they might be tapped in to be able, almost like you are a walking body cam.
In other words, right now, they're knowing everything what we're doing. So, Jeff, they've got you too.
Woo-hoo.
That's right.
About time.
And we're in a time loop because we got 2 minutes left, folks.
Oh, man. Again?
Yeah.
This is why we have to keep having him come on.
Oh. Well, I enjoy it. I mean,
yeah.
Because when Henry said something to me about the other day, I'm like, let's see, this is Memorial Weekend. Let's see, I should be out barbecuing. Forget that. I've got some great people I'm going to be around.
So, is this the first time you've been on with us since we was up in Columbus?
You know, he was back in
Yeah.
March.
No, that's since Columbus, it's the first time.
Yeah, that was one weird place. No.
It was like walking into a movie set, Henry. I mean, Jeffrey you could have filmed a movie out there about like a mall that still has stores but looks completely abandoned.
Completely abandoned, and all the stores were filled with aliens.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean the ones from outer space.
Oh.
But it's a good weekend, though.
We're going to have to run. Give out your stuff real quick, like where people get in contact with you.
Well, if they've got UFO reports, what they can go to is MUFON.com, which is our international website. But if they want to contact me personally, then go through our Ohio MUFON at MUFONOhio.com, and they can reach out through my webmaster and get a hold of me that way on there. That's what I've got coming up. Besides, I'm going to be putting on a conference myself, Henry, in August. I'll get you more details about.
Oh, good. Let me know. Crop
circles is going to be part of the conversation here.
All right. With that, Jeff.
TheParanormalView.com is our website. All sorts of links. You can follow me on Instagram and on Twitter at Real Badger.
And we will see you next week at the same time. Good night, everybody, and thanks for listening.
Happy Memorial Day.
Yes. You've been listening to The Paranormal View on the Para X Radio Network. Join us again next week at the same time for more of the paranormal.